Hello there and welcome back to the studio today. So today we're going to continue this portrait study that we started yesterday. So I'm going to mix up a value scale on my palette. So the colors that we're using today are just titanium white and raw umber, and both the brands are Winsor and Newton. And if you want to know exactly what materials I'm using, you can always go ahead and scroll down to the description box below. So just getting a little tiny value scale. And I think that's going to be alright to start off with. So what I'm going to do is get a smaller brush. As most of you know now, I'm going to start off with a little area of structure. So, I don't know, what do you say? How about we get a little ambitious today? Let's just jump right into the eye. So it's important to have this linear construct well established before jumping right into any kind of form modeling. So I'm going to have a light brush, a middle brush, and a dark brush. So my dark brush, let's say it'll be this one, just the raw umber. And it can actually get a little darker than that, but it's okay. So I have a light brush, a middle brush, and a very light brush. So I guess this will be the light brush. So I'm going to start off with my darkest dark. So let's say it'll be this little corner of the eyebrow. So let's suppose that's going to be the darkest dark. Now let's go ahead and make a little smooth transition of value there. So I'm going to switch to the middle tone brush. And I'm not really holding my palette today, just because I'm going to be focusing on the structures for this portrait for the majority of the day, if not the entire day. So this is going to be yet again another good example of how to manage your time, how to take it one step at a time. I use my fan brush to help eliminate glare. So with the middle tone brush, we're going to start to add a little more specificity into these shapes. So it's turning further away from the shadow here, and it's going to start to get lighter. And as we approach the tear ducts, we're going to receive quite a bit of light. So right around here. Very bright. Now that's not our lightest light, but it's pretty light. Probably looks straight white on the in comparison to the other values, but it's not. And there isn't really one way to do something. There isn't. I'm not going to tell you not to do something a certain way. You should always explore and find what works for you. But I think that, at least for me, it's a little easier to observe the value first. Just make decisions on the value transitions. So such as this plane right here. It's going to be a little bit lighter, but not quite as light as this area. So these are things that would be very kind of difficult to figure out if we were working in alla prima. I'll be switching back and forth between the brushes. Let's just look at this corner, this side of the eye socket, turning away from the light. Now, I had a lot of problems with the last painting that I did, and I think that was probably just because I feel like I rushed the process a little bit. I could have taken a little more care in the transfer drawing, I think. and done a separate portrait study. I kind of skipped that and just kind of went straight into the painting. So remember, this is a study for a much larger painting, and I want to get a really good understanding of the portrait, because the portrait is going to be the main focal point of the painting. On a side note, I really like Winsor Newton's raw umber, especially for underpainting. It's a really nice kind of warm gray. It's not quite as warm as burnt umber. I really like it. But anyway, so here's the side plane of the eyelid. Now Steve, our model, is looking down, so the eyelid is actually going to have quite a bit of value transitions on it. So a little bit lighter there. Now we can compare one area of value to another. So this one right here is going to be very similar to this one, meaning the angles are very, very similar. But I think it's probably just being compressed in the photo reference. So this may actually get a little darker in comparison to that shape. A little bit darker underneath the eyelid. Now I'm actually going to switch to another brush because I can't quite get my darkest dark. So with another brush, a little bit of my Citrus Essence brush cleaner, which acts pretty much just the same as odorless mineral spirits, we're going to go in with just raw umber on its own. There we go. Now we have a very nice dark. Let's go ahead and put that dark right up here. This is a very relaxing way to make a portrait. It's a very, very relaxing way to work. So it's going to be getting a little bit lighter up here as the structure of the eyebrow starts to approach the forehead. And let's go ahead and put in the dark over here. Now I actually have quite a bit of brushes now. I have a light brush, a middle tone. Wait, here, I can't even count right now. Here are the brushes in their order. I have a very light brush, a middle light, a middle dark, and a dark dark. And I just kind of had to include the dark dark because for some reason my paint was getting a little bit of the titanium white in it. Oh, and another thing I should say is the last underpainting I used flake white. And that was because I wanted it to dry pretty much overnight. And kind of running low on my flake white, so I'm just going to be working with titanium white. It makes the raw umber look a little bit cooler than the flake white did, but it's alright. So now there's going to be a plane right over here. It's going to be facing away from the light. And then progressively get lighter. But this is going to be a very sharp plane. So it's perhaps one of the sharpest plane changes right here. Let's go ahead and switch back to the light brush. And just right over here. Now we're starting to see the the side of the eye socket take form as we introduce a value right next to it. So having these brushes on hand by order of value really does cut back in the amount of time it takes to clean off the brushes and for the mixing and all that. And I'm taking right from the value scale that you saw me mix up in the beginning of this video. A little bit darker over there. So having that little value scale is extremely useful for this. So now this plane is going to be very subtle. It's going to be turning away from the light, but not quite as fast here as it is here. So this is going to have a much sharper edge over here as it moves all the way up into here. It's going to be a lot of very interesting forms to look for in this portrait. A little bit of a lighter plane there, and then darker down here. And another thing I'm going to get to decide after completing this this study, after this entire portrait is completed, I'm going to get to decide how far I want to refine the portrait on the final painting. So we're really taking it one step at a time. There's really no need to rush here. This world is fast-paced enough. So let's take some time to sit back and observe the shapes. Even in here, there's going to be a little bit of a form overlap. So that is, it's going to get a little bit darker around here. Maybe not that dark. Let's switch to the middle light brush. There we go, about that value. And it's going to be a little bit lighter right on the side. I'm actually going to have to push that shape out a little bit. How about we call this, let's call this video form, all about form. There's a lot of interesting form to study here. And again, we're just going back and forth between the brushes. No serious mixing going on here. So this form is turning further away. Lighter in here. Now I'm not going to spend the entire video on say one eye like I did last time. I'm going to be moving rather quickly so we can observe these forms a little faster. But you can already see with these simple values, the eye is almost starting to look like it's emerging out of the canvas. It's a pretty neat thing to be able to do that with just monochrome. So now we're going to start to move into the glabella, and the glabella is this little shape right here. Each model has a very characteristic glabella, and this one, and this model's glabella in particular is very kind of rectangle, elongated rectangle, I think. Definitely going to help us out for the final painting. Let's go ahead and push this light a little further, a little brighter. And now that's going to pave way towards the other side. So let's go ahead and jump in there with our darkest dark. So just a raw umber and a little bit of our brush cleaner. So there is our darkest dark. It's also helping to sharpen that edge. And you know what, I think that dark is going to have to go over here too. Alright, so started off with our darkest dark, and now going to switch to the middle tone brush, darker middle tone brush. I'm going to start to put in this, let's make it darker. So this plane starts to turn away from the light, but not as far as this one. This plane here is the furthest away from the light. So it's going to be the darkest. It's pretty much an accent, really. It's the boundary where the side of the eyelid kind of turns away towards the concavity of the eye socket right there, and it's being blocked by the nose. Now we're going to put in the darker shapes for the eyebrows. We're going to use our darkest dark yet again, right here. Switching to the middle light brush. It's going to get a little lighter over here. And lighter over here. Now the linear drawing underneath that we created yesterday with the burnt umber paint, this is all dry. So it's important to let this drawing dry. I'm sorry, there's paint all over my fingernails. Yep, that's daily life of an artist here. Now we're going to move further down here. Start to add a little bit more light as we start to construct the nose down here. Going to be kind of careful about this angle. He is looking down, so it's going to be important to not lose the center line of his nose. Moving on down here. I'm going to let today's video go a little bit longer. I noticed some folks are kind of missing the longer videos. So I'll let today be a little bit longer. So this plane here is going to be a little bit lighter because it's facing the light a little bit more. And then directly beneath it, over here, it's going to get a little bit darker, a little form overlap there, but not as dark here as it is over there. So this is going to be all about form. A little bit lighter in there. I'm going to switch to the light brush. I think I might have some of a drawing problem, bit of a drawing problem here. The angle of the glabella might be, I don't know, this is why it's kind of difficult to work from photo reference. I think I might need to adjust the angle directly beneath the glabella. Push that down. Looks a little better. Now back to the light brush. Going to continue sculpting these planes. And a little bit darker over here. Some lighter as we move away. So we're constructing the side plane of the nose. It's receiving quite a bit of light over here and then starts to get darker down here. It's going to get darker right over here. And then pick up some light again as we move down. And we'll throw in a little highlight here. Put in the little middle light here. And then it's going to start to turn away from the light near the bottom of the bulb of the nose. This is the bulb of the nose. Throw in our darkest dark right in there. Use my fan brush to eliminate some glare. A little bit of a lighter plane here for the wing of the nose. And we're going to switch to our middle light brush. That easy. Creating the curvature for the wing of the nose. Going to switch to our darker brush. Start to push that shape down. And just like we did yesterday when we started drawing out the linear construct with that drawing color, we're really focusing on this little triangle here. A little bit of subtlety into this transition there. And back into the light. And so around the side of the nose, it's going to be pretty light. So around the side of the nose here, it's going to be pretty light. And let's go ahead and push it a little bit lighter, perhaps than we see it, just to try to get a strong effect of form. And try to get that shape of the cast shadow being projected from the wing of the nose. Now, squinting really helps to see the value relationships, and I think that here I'm missing a little bit of a plane. Definitely thinking three-dimensional, sculpting out these planes. So switching brushes, there's going to be kind of a little bit of a challenge on the side of the nose here. Not really sure. I feel like the corner of the bulb of the nose is kind of touching the side of the face, which is a little ambiguous. but we will go ahead and paint it this way, and if we don't like it, we'll change it in the color pass for this. A bit of a lighter plane over here. So I'm going to need to add a little more specificity onto his nose. So I think that this is too much of a generic round shape right now still. So I'm going to need to add some more planes. I'm thinking perhaps this whole shape, pushing it down or pushing it to the left a little bit. So I'm just pushing it with the paint. That's going to move the highlight. And now the wing of the nose, I think I'm going to put in more of an angle. Something like that. A little bit of a darker plane there. And so back to the darkest dark. Let's kind of sneak in a little bit of an edge here. And switch to the fan brush. And so that means this edge here, I'm going to push it. I'm going to make this edge very subtle. When you're dealing with form, you really want to consider the edge quality between each form and between the boundaries of the forms. And this is a boundary here. The boundary between the form of the nose and the side of the face. Now let's go ahead and sculpt in a little more of a side plane here. And let's go ahead and put in some shapes for the zygomatic area, the cheekbone. So we're observing each form at a time, all in accordance to this linear construct that we created. There's going to be a plane right up here that's going to be facing away from the light a little bit more than this one, but not quite this much. I'm just putting in a value first, and then I'm going to adjust it. Yeah, I'm trying to make this a little more like my earlier videos, the classic portrait painting tutorials. Well, we could probably even name it that. I did say that they weren't going to go away completely, right? And I thought might as well, since we're doing a study of a portrait, might as well take advantage, seize the opportunity. Now let's go ahead and describe the zygomatic region with a little more clarity. So we're putting in another plane change right over here. It's going to be darker over here, so we're going to push this plane division for now. I'm going to push a little more light over here. Now we're really starting to see these forms emerge. I gotta be careful not to over model, so I'm over modeling a little bit there, meaning that this shape got a little too dark for the plane that it's in, the angle that the plane is with respect to the light source. I'm going back to my lighter light. I'm gonna try to push this little facet. So right around here, there's going to be a little bit of subtlety. So getting my darker brush, I'm actually going to make this just one smidgen lighter right up here and leave this area darker. So now we're adding quite a bit of subtlety there. Now we're going to move on down. This is going to be the kind of the bottom area of the cheekbone. So the zygomaticus zygomaticus muscle going down here. Just think of it as a side plane, that's all. Just a side plane. Darker over here. Switching brushes to our lighter brush. Let's go ahead and push this plane. Back to the middle light brush. Now we're really starting to see the forms emerge, but still a little bit of trouble there with the nose. So I'm going to go ahead and re-examine the plane here. So I think it's that I'm making it too bright. I'm going to drop the value just a little bit. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the planes over here. So just like we lightened that one, we're going to lighten this one over here. It's kind of like a plane by plane analysis. I'm going to push this light a little bit here. We're going to do the same kind of thing over here. Push that light, but then right next to it there's going to be a plane change right over here. We're going to soften this edge up here, right by the eyebrow. So this whole area on this side of the model's eye socket is the zygomatic region, the top region of the cheekbone, right up here. It's going to actually pick up a little more light as we introduce some of the form overlaps. So there's some overlapping of form taking place right up here. So here we have the temporal region of the skull, side of the skull here. And as we emerge into the light over here, we're approaching the superciliary arch, giving us this very distinct shape right here. Almost feel like I know anatomy now. A little bit larger eyebrow over here. It's a little more light here on the side of the temporal region of the skull. There's also going to be a little bit of a frontal swoop for the skull, a little bit of a rhythm going all the way down here towards the side of the eyes. And you can see that swoop, this swoop that I'm talking about in this plane right here. And then as we move towards the frontal region of the skull, it's going to get lighter. But we still have to describe the temporal region with a little more specificity. So now we're putting in the boundary of the side plane, kind of describing the shape of the parietal, of the temporal region. But I will say I'm not an anatomist, so if I get any of these terms wrong, oops. In any case, let's think about them as planes in relation to the light source. So we're going to add a little more light now to this region of the skull. So this is going to be the frontal region. So it's going to be very bright over here. And then as it turns away from the light, it's going to get progressively darker. See how it's getting progressively darker? And again, I'm just taking right from that value scale on the palette. There's hardly any mixing going on. Now we're going to start to connect these planes together. So this is the glabella, and it's going to be moving right up towards the side of the superciliary arch on the other side. So right here, superciliary. It's going to be getting even lighter. Over here. Barely noticeable though. And we can definitely show some of the curvature of the skull here as the light starts to drop. And we start to face the light less and less. So now that we have all of these large planes established, let's go ahead and add some more refinement to them. So for instance, we're going to add a little bridge between this plane and this one. And as we're doing that, we're also sharpening this edge here and softening that one. Now we can still push the light for the frontal region of the skull a little further. So there's still going to be quite a bit of light here that we're missing. So a little shape of light over here. Some little form overlaps here. Don't want to do too many of them, but going to illustrate a few little form overlaps. See that? So as we're doing that, I think there could still be more light here. So a little more light here for the nasal bone. So now we're going to be pushing the angularity of these lightmost facing planes. And even on this top region of the skull, even though it's kind of flattened out by the photograph, let's go ahead and push this lighter facing plane, lightmost facing plane. Now I see that this area is still getting a little over modeled down. So let's go ahead and bring down that value. So by comparison, I feel like this area, even though it's darker, it could still use a little more light. So we're gauging each of these shapes in relation to these larger planes. We're keying them based on these lighter planes, that is. It'll be a little bit lighter there. And now that we push this lighter, let's go ahead and push this plane lighter as well. There's a little bit of the tone of the canvas showing underneath the eyes that I don't quite want to show. I'm going to go ahead and cover that. And at the same time, I guess we can add a little more, a little tiny speck of light. Nope, wrong value. Just a tiny bit lighter. Almost can't even see that. Super tiny bit of light there. A little bit more for the form overlaps here. A little overlapping of form there. Now this area is starting to worry me. So I'm thinking that it could be that I'm just over modeling here. So let's go ahead and bring out a little more light over here. It's also, I think it's a local color or a local value change here. So I think it could actually be a little bit darker here. Now he's not a marble sculpture, so, and none of us are. We all have different regions of value and color shift within our skin tones. So a little bit lighter over here, trying to emphasize right there the frontal swoop. That little swoop goes around here. Right into the superciliary, right into the superciliary. Little highlight there, the corner of the superciliary. Use the fan brush to eliminate some glare. So again, I just felt like that area was getting a little too dark in comparison to all of these shapes. So again, this is going to be dedicated to those of you that wanted another portrait painting tutorial style, like my older style videos. Now it's starting to read a little better. Let's go ahead and push this little plane here, even though it's very hard to see on the photo reference. And this little area as well. So we're really keying the lights now. Keying the lights means that we're looking at each of the spots of light, and gauging the brightness of each spot in relation to one another. So for example, this area is going to be lighter, but not as light as this. So we're kind of sandwiching this value by comparing it to this one and this one actually. So I think that there's gonna be a little bit of a highlight there that's gonna be lighter than this shape, so soften this edge a little bit. Let's put in that highlight. A little bit of light to help differentiate the planes. So now the forms for the face are starting to read a little bit better. I'm still kind of concerned with that angle. This angle for the nose. I think it could be that this angle needs to turn inwards a little more. But I'm not going to stress too much about it. As long as it looks like the structures are working well in space, that's all that really matters. And that's the good thing about doing a separate portrait study for a larger painting that you're going to work on. Whatever mistakes I do here, I'm going to be sure not to replicate in the final painting. All right, so I think we should move on to the rest of the shapes now. So I'm going to go ahead and mix up a little. How about this? I'm going to recharge this palette. So by recharge, I mean I'm going to remix the value scale. And that should be about good. So I'm going to think about which shapes now that I want to emphasize, and I want to render everything out. So there is going to be a plane over here. It's catching a little bit more light. And I'm going to switch brushes. So his mustache. So I'm going to switch brushes to some larger brushes just to cover some more real estate here. So the mustache, the local value of the mustache is going to be a little bit darker than the local value of the beard. So right down here. And again, there's no right or wrong way to paint. Just find whatever works for you and watch out for people that tell you there's only one way or not to do something a certain way. They may have other things in mind other than art. So that is, I'll give you a little story here. So my, as I'm filling in these shapes for the mustache, my first teacher, I'm not going to say who it is, one of my first teachers, I should say, was an impressionist, kind of in the, anyway, in the impressionist school. And one day I decided that I didn't want to make a shadow a certain color, and he was like, "Do you want to be just like the mud painters?" Talking about painters such as Raphael, calling him a mud painter. I'm just, what? I think sometimes some folks they just want to glorify a certain way of working, a certain technique or method or ideology. And yeah, I would watch out for that. Certainly watch out for that. And I don't know why that made me think of that little story, but anyway, just thought I would let you know. There's no one way to do any of this. Just find which way works for you. So there's going to be a little bit of light down here. Perhaps not that light. So I'm keying the lights in relation to one another. So this light is not going to be as bright as this one or this one, but it's going to be much lighter than, say, this area of the mustache. So now we're going to just try to get that value. That looks a little closer. Then it's going to get darker over here. I should be switching brushes. My middle dark brush. A little bit darker over here. And darker over here. As the mustache starts to turn away. And then we're going to go ahead and wait a minute, hold on. So let's go ahead and fill in this value first. Then we're going to go ahead and put in the beard, at least the side of the beard. You know, even though my first teacher, or one of my first teachers that I made the example of before, even though he told me not to be a mud painter or whatever, I think that kind of helped me gain some objectivity, or at least just see that, you know, it doesn't have to always be one way, just to see where he was trying to kind of attack me from. I don't know why I keep going back to that story. Well, here's why. Getting off topic again. So I'm putting in a lighter plane for the beard, and I'm going to key the light here. So this light is going to be much brighter than the lights in the flesh tone, but not straight white. So maybe a little bit darker than that. But anyway, I think The reason I'm thinking of that example right now is my teacher, I don't know why I keep thinking of that example. My teacher, I think he had a beard back then, or at least some facial hair that resembled this. I think that's why I keep coming back to that example. I'm sorry, I keep going on a tangent. So it's going to be a little bit softer now for the beard, the edge quality of all of these shapes. We'll let some of these brush strokes kind of give the illusion of the facial hair. But over here, as we move down, it's going to get a little darker. A little bit darker over here. Even though this is facial hair, we can still put in some indications of the plane. Lighter over here. Now switching brushes, there's going to be quite a definitive boundary over here. We're going to sharpen that little boundary there. And we're going to go back in and start to put in some of these lights. Lighter over here. Now the beard in general is going to have quite subtle shapes of light. So all down here, it's going to be pretty light, but the areas around it are going to be darker. So it's going to get darker here, but not quite as dark as that. So we're going to be bouncing around these values, and this also pertains to the form as well. So we're actually looking at form in a different way as opposed to just looking at the forms on the face. We're also looking at the forms for the hair, the facial hair. Use the fan brush to help eliminate some glare. Switching brushes, it's going to get a little, switch to a different one. It's going to get a little darker in the corner of the beard. And I'm just going to put a little glimpse of a cast shadow. I don't want to put too much for that. Now I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of a cast shadow underneath of the ear. Right over here. And a little bit of a shadow on the side of the tragus of the ear. So there's the tragus. I'm going to put in a very distinct dark shape here for the ear. I'm not going to render out the ear too much with this one. A little bit of a darker shape there. And then darker on the back side. That should be enough for the top region of the ear. Let's put in a little bit of light for the earlobe. Again, don't want to do too much for the ear. A little bit of light for the tragus. And now we'll move on to the hair. I'm going to put in some darker values the side of the hair, and then paint some lighter ones on top. Gonna have to put in some more raw umber. So I'm going to start with these darker shapes. Then I'm going to layer over top of them with some lighter ones. So again, the light on the facial hair is going to be pretty light, especially over here. It's going to be kind of the lightest over here. See how I'm kind of moving back and forth between these brushes, just to kind of cover very quickly. Use the fan brush to eliminate some glare. A little bit of a light shape here. Those light shapes for the hair. Fan brush eliminates some glare. I'm going to go in with a little more of a dark value. Just get the side, little dark accents for the side of the hair. And while we have this dark brush, let's go ahead and throw in a background value just to kind of differentiate this shape. Very carefully now, trying not to go over top of the light. This will also help to add a little bit of texture to the painting. Just let some of the brush strokes show here and there. There's going to be a little bit of hair showing over here. I think it just looks neat. adding a little bit of a dark shape underneath of the beard. Just add a little more dimension to the beard. So I think I'm just going to unify this little dark shape here to kind of simplify that shape. Don't want to do too much for that. And I think we're just about almost done with the underpainting for this. And so yeah, I just wanted to make a video that's a little bit longer for those of you that miss my weekly portrait painting tutorials. A little bit more light there, a little bit of a darker shape. I think I'm just going to put a little more light here and then we'll call it a day. So again, fan brush to the rescue. And with that, I think that just about wraps up today's video. So again, I really want to bring the studio to you every single day. And I tried to end the video like I used to in the past. I almost said this week's portrait painting video like I used to. But anyway, I just wanted to create a video just like my older portrait painting tutorials where you get to see the full length painting develop over, I don't know how long this video is going to be, I guess an hour, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, I don't know. But anyway, I hope that this video helps you out. I wish you the best and I'll be back in another 24 hours.